The man Gus Fring could never forget, and never forgive the world for taking away. Before the empire, before the legend of Heisenberg, there was another story. A story built not on drugs or violence, on partnership, on vision, on relationship. In the quiet heart of a remote Mexican village, sunlight dances across a fountain. It looks ordinary at first, a piece of stonework surrounded by children and families. But at its center is an inscription that demands attention. Dedicado a Max. It feels out of place, too elegant, too personal, too heavy with meaning. The show Better Call Saul never explains who Max is. The camera lingers, almost daring us to ask. And if you've only seen this moment, it's a riddle with no answer. But if you've walked through Breaking Bad, if you've seen Gustavo Fring's rise, his precision, his cruelty, and his mask, then you know. The truth is hidden in plain sight. This fountain is not just an Easter egg, it's a gravestone, a confession, and the key to Gus Fring's soul. On the surface, Gus Fring is the model citizen, a successful entrepreneur, a pillar of his community, a man who donates to hospitals and builds youth centers. In Albuquerque, he's the proud owner of Los Pollos Hermanos, the family-friendly fast food chain. But peel back that mask and you find something else. Gus is a drug lord, calculated, disciplined, merciless. Every word, every gesture, every smile hides intent. He's a man who never wastes a move. And yet, Better Call Saul showed us there was more. Behind the cold genius is something human, fragile, and wounded. Something that drives everything Gus becomes. And it begins with one name, Maximino Arciniega. If you're gripped by untold truths like this, hidden details, buried emotions, the stories beneath the stories, then don't just watch, be part of this journey. Hit subscribe, share it with someone who loves a good mystery, and let's keep uncovering what others miss. Max was born in Chile, in the poverty of the Santiago slums. He should have been swallowed by that world, another forgotten life. But he wasn't, because at some point Max met Gustavo Fring, and the two became extremely close to one another. Gus took him under his wing. Gus paid for Max's education in chemistry at the Universidad de Santiago de Chile. Chemistry, chemical engineering, whatever Max studied, Gus made sure he had every opportunity to succeed. Gus rescued him from the gutter, and Max rewarded that faith with brilliance. Together, they dreamed bigger than survival. They founded Los Pollos Hermanos, not just as a chicken restaurant, but as a front and cover to cook highly pure crystal meth secretly. While the chain grew respectably, Max perfected something far more dangerous, methamphetamine. And it wasn't just meth. It was pure, crystalline, a product cleaner than anything the cartel had ever touched. Gus and Max weren't just building a business, they were building an empire. But empires require allies, and Gus wanted the Juarez cartel. The two wished to establish a partnership with the cartel to help them distribute meth rather than cocaine, and in order to gain the attention of the cartel's leader, Don Eladio of Fuente, Gustavo began giving away free samples of Max's meth to cartel operatives without the Don's consent, greatly angering him. A dangerous move, provocative, disrespectful even, but it worked. Don Eladio himself agreed to meet them at his villa. That day should have been the beginning of everything. Gus and Max walked in as equals, partners, visionaries. The two desperately attempted to convince him to take up their business proposal, promising to yield the cartel millions. They offered the future. Don Eladio, however, wasn't impressed by these upstarts and adverse to selling methamphetamine, and was instead angered at Gustavo's disrespectful actions of selling meth to his men without consent and manipulating him into a meeting. And he wanted to make a point. As punishment, with a flick of his hand, Eladio ordered Hector Salamanca to act. Hector raised his gun and shot Max in the head on the patio of his mansion, while Juan Bolsa restrained Gus. Gus was forced to watch the blood from his lover's fatal head wound drip into the swimming pool, a vision that stayed with him, turning the turquoise water into something Gus would never forget. Max's body fell, lifeless, as Gus was forced to his knees. Juan Bolsa held him down. He couldn't look away. He couldn't move. He couldn't even scream. He just watched, helpless. That image, the blood in the pool, Max's body floating, burned itself into Gus's mind forever. And Eladio told him the only reason he wasn't killed alongside Max is because he was aware of his mysterious past in Chile. For most men, this moment would break them. For Gus Fring, it forged him. Max wasn't just his business partner. The show suggests he was far more, his closest friend, perhaps his lover, his reason for building something lasting. Losing him wasn't just painful, it was defining. Years later, Gus built something extraordinary, a whole village in Mexico. The entire isolated Mexican community featured in Dedicado a Max was personally funded by Gus, along with the memorial fountain, as a tribute to Max's legacy. This allowed Gus to give the children in the community the protection from outside negative influences like drugs and crime that Max never received growing up in Chile. Gus even established a scholarship in Max's name at the University of New Mexico's chemistry department, which went on to fund the education of many future chemists, including Gail Boeticker. It's more than a monument. It's a transformation. Gus took the worst moment of his life, blood in a pool, and remade it into flowing water that gives life to a community. He took grief and turned it into order. But the fountain is also a scar, a reminder. Every time Gus sees it, he remembers, and a whisper of revenge that never fades. For a moment, revenge was complete, but it was never enough. The fountain isn't just symbolic. In Better Call Saul Season 5, it becomes practical. After Mike Ehrmantraut kills Werner Ziegler on Gus's orders, his soul cracks under guilt. Drunk, angry, he picks a fight with gangsters and is nearly killed. Later, Mike woke up in a secluded Mexican village where he was patched up by one of Gus Fring's associates, Dr. Barry Goodman. Gus arrives. He doesn't scold Mike, he doesn't beg. He talks about revenge, about justice, about how violence, when precise, can mean something. As the memorial fountain with the placard reading "Dedicated to Max" is shown standing between them, Gus subtly points to Max's memory without naming it. He knows Mike has lost too. He knows grief is the only language both men speak fluently. And in that moment, Gus doesn't just recruit Mike, he recruits Mike's pain. But not everyone was fooled by Gus's mask. Curiously, the smiling, laughing chaos engine of the cartel, a remark from Lalo Salamanca during Better Call Saul Season 5, Episode 1, Magic Man, also suggests. While speaking with Juan Bolsa, Lalo described his plan to keep a close watch over Gus's movements, as he suspected that Gus wanted revenge against Hector for killing his boyfriend. It was a throwaway line, a taunt, but it was also true. While Lalo was clearly just being his usual childish self with the boyfriend remark, Lalo was actually spot on about Gus and Max. Ultimately, this is indicative of how the deceptively clever Lalo was able to read the enigmatic Gustavo Fring, culminating in their final encounter in Better Call Saul Season 6. Lalo saw through Gus in a way few ever did, and that made him dangerous. By Better Call Saul Season 6, the subtext was no longer subtle. Gus sits at a wine bar with David, a charming sommelier. They laugh, they share, they connect. Gus wants to let the wall fall, just for a moment. Though Gus ultimately left David hanging, the scene served to finally confirm that Gus was interested in men, which means that it's possible that Gus and Max were lovers. This would certainly explain why Gus Fring has devoted his entire life to the establishment of his own drug empire as a means of attaining revenge against Hector and the entire Juarez cartel for Max's murder. But he doesn't. He walks away. The mission comes first. The revenge, the empire, the mask, all of it outweighs desire. Still, the moment confirms what the fountain whispers. Gus Fring loved Max. Revenge, for most men, is hot-blooded. For Gus Fring, it is systemic. He doesn't lash out, he waits, he calculates, he builds. For 2 decades, every restaurant, every ally, every investment is a brick in the wall he's constructing to bury the Salamanca family and Don Eladio. When the time finally comes, when Gus kills Lalo Salamanca, it's not passion that drives him, it's inevitability. Lalo's arrogance, his need to film his triumph, buys Gus the seconds he needs to strike. In killing Lalo, Gus avenges part of Max's death, but it's not enough. It never will be. One Salamanca was never enough. And so Gus hardens. The grief that once flowed freely becomes something else, compartmentalized, buried. By the time we meet him in Breaking Bad, Gus Fring is the mask fully realized, calm, untouchable, terrifying. He stares at Don Eladio's pool not as a man reliving trauma, but as a predator marking the site of his unfinished hunt. But the fountain remains. The fountain is proof that under the mask there once was a man who loved deeply and lost everything. The inscription is small, just 3 words, dedicated to Max. But those words carry the entire weight of Gus Fring's story. They explain why he hides his heart behind a mask, why he builds empires in silence, why he funds scholarships for chemists like Gail Bedicher, why he torments Hector Salamanca in a nursing home rather than giving him death. Every move, every smile, every kill, all of it flows back to that day at the pool, to the body in the water, to the man he couldn't save. Maximino Arciniega only appeared once in Breaking Bad, but his ghost haunts 2 entire shows. He is the reason Gus Fring exists. And the fountain, quietly flowing in a sunlit village, whispers the truth, that the dead don't stay dead, not when love turns grief into empire.